Welcome back to FreightWaves Live at Home. We have our next fireside chat here. My name is Kevin Hill. I'm the executive publisher here at FreightWaves, and I have a very special guest with us right now. It's Andrew Berberick. He's the co-founder of Baton out in San Francisco, California, and we're going to talk about capacity. We're going to talk about final mile. We're going to talk about dwell times here with Andrew. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Yeah, great to be with you, Kevin.
Yeah, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and Baton and what you and Nate Robert are doing out on the West Coast right now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew. I'm a co-founder of Baton. And really the service we provide is that the customers who use Baton will one day never have to send long haul drivers to warehouses again. And the way that we do that is we operate a network of drop zones that we place around major cities. And the goal is, instead of a long haul driver coming in and waiting around for an appointment or getting stuck in traffic or waiting in a warehouse, they can just stage a load at one of our sites outside of the city. And then we operate a network of local drivers to relay the final and first mile. So those long haul drivers are always on the road.
So, Andrew, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, even before Baton was started, here in Chattanooga, down in the bar,
in the FreightWaves bar. That was the place to be.
It was the place to be, and it's almost about to be.
We're almost back.
We're almost back. Almost back. But we were talking about this. We're talking about long haul, over the road drivers, and some of the downsides of that, and most of that is going into metro areas, going into LA. Trying to find your way around, irregular routes, right? Going to places that you hadn't been before. And Baton is part of that, kind of that final mile, going to that warehouse, picking up, bringing back to a central location that increases efficiency. So why now? Why is there hasn't been a company like this before? Why is now the perfect time to fit that niche and launch Baton?
Well, it's interesting because the concept that we provide, right, these local relays isn't necessarily new to the industry. Most large carriers either do or used to do local relays, and the reason I think they've stopped is, I think there's a perception in the industry that local relays are just costly, really hard to manage, operationally complex, and most people that have set them up have divested from them because it's hard to both utilize a long haul fleet and keep a local fleet utilized. I think where we've found our niche is basically enabling those same advantages without having to deal with the cost or utilization problems of a local fleet. And right now, it's really interesting if people talk about this capacity problem, and it's totally real. Before we started Baton, we interviewed about 100 different drivers by going to truck stop across California, and we asked them all, what's the biggest problem facing your job? And they said detention and dwell. Getting stuck at a warehouse totally sucks. They're not getting money. They're wasting time. It's horrible for their employers. And when you take the number one problem that drivers cited before COVID and you map that against this massive capacity shortage that exists during COVID, this is a pretty incredible time to roll out a solution like this because you can both increase efficiency and you can offer a recruiting tool to get drivers.
So yeah, dwell times have always been an issue in the trucking industry. Explain to our audience and kind of what you found out about dwell times pre-COVID, during COVID, and kind of here on the tail end. What are the differences you've seen in dwell times and detention paid out?
Yeah, so basically, when we talk about dwell and detention, we look at three different buckets. We look at the most obvious one, which is detention and dwell at the facility. Industry average for that is about 3 hours. But then there's all these other sources of wasted time that are even larger than that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So, if you imagine you're driving from LA to Dallas and you have to hit an appointment window, and if you're late, you're going to get fined. Well, the driver is going to bake a lot of dwell into their transit so they don't arrive late. That's called in-transit dwell. And then, you complete your delivery at Target, and there's no way someone is stacked the delivery at Walmart or the pickup at Walmart such that you're super efficient. So there's another source of waste there. And What we found is before we started Baton, it was really about eliminating dwell at facility. But as we've really grown this out, what we found is there are these emergent macro efficiency gains by just converting every single load to this off-prem drop and hook model. Imagine how different your network planning would be if you could plan hub to hub instead of warehouse to warehouse with all these appointments.
And that kind of goes into what you said earlier about, specific trucking companies have done this before. It's been very costly to do because you're matching your own freight up. So while you might have 200 trucks, 300 trucks, or 50 trucks, it's really hard to do that with that. But if you go to a third party service provider like Baton, who can scale into the macro and scale that up between many different trucking companies, then you can you can lower those costs, and it works out on paper, right?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, every one of our customers actually has a local relay operation somewhere. Now the problem is, in order to operate a local relay, you need enough volume and density to keep a local fleet utilized. But because we're an aggregator, we can combine the freight between multiple carriers to give them each that economies of scale advantage that neither of them could have gotten on their own. And so we can open new locations that none of them would be able to open without us, or without each other.
I like that word, the aggregator. And that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're aggregating all of those loads down into a single provider to hit the last mile, to hit those warehouse docks in there, and that's where the efficiencies come in. And I think I think to a lot of people it just makes sense right now.
Yeah, and actually, one cool example that I like to think about when here's like a case study of like where this really was worked well before we existed. If you look at the average long haul carrier and you look at the amount of driver hours, productive driving hours that a carrier would get out of their drivers, the average is about 6.5 out of 11 usable hours that the driver gets. And that's the average across the country. Some of the larger carriers that have done a great job, they'll get 7. Walmart gets over 9. Now, why is that? Why is it that Walmart's private fleet can get over 9 usable productive driver hours, but a long haul carrier whose bread and butter is moving drivers, they only get 7? Well, it's because Walmart plans DC to DC, and those DCs are 24/7 hubs. Everything's drop, and they're way more efficient because of that. So our goal is to give those kinds of benefits to not necessarily Walmart, but to carriers that provide to Walmart, so that they can get Walmart type numbers out of their drivers.
Yeah, and that's like a 50% increase, or almost a 50% increase in productivity, and that's what we see in Sonar, and we've always seen it with our detention or hours of service. I'm sorry, or hours of service data is that 6.5 hours of drive time, and you're looking at 11 hours being the max on hours of service, and you're getting just a little bit more than half, and a lot of that is traffic congestion. And congestion within the city limits, right? If you talk about huge metro areas, LA, Dallas, Atlanta, if you show up at 5 o'clock, I mean, you're adding 2 or 3 hours of probably sitting in a parking lot, which are the interstates, going to that final pickup or delivery area, and coming out, you're wasting some time too. So to get that productive, those Walmart hours, as you say, is to really have end to end, bumper to bumper, dock to dock, very efficient systems.
Yep, 100%.
Let's get back over to the capacity shortage, right? Because that's what everyone wants to talk about right now, is that capacity shortage. We have OTRI, nationwide is 24-25%. You get into the reefer market, that's 42% on a nationwide basis. Flatbeds caught up with everybody now. It's humming right along. You have specific markets that are well north of 30 or 40%. I mean, 30 or 40% of all load tenders out there are being rejected right now. It's just really a tight market. From your point of view, what are some of the reasons for this? And do you see new capacity coming along in 2021 or anytime soon?
Yeah, well, so there's the capacity shortage is really interesting, and I think there's a lot of variables at play. The three that come to mind are, number one, there's fewer drivers on the market right now. During COVID, fewer CDLs were issued. People weren't necessarily going into a training center and getting trained to become a truck driver. And you also, overlay that with people are getting stimulus checks, and maybe it's more desirable and you can make more money getting a stimulus check than going and jumping on the road and driving and not seeing your family for weeks on end. So the combination of those two variables has really led to the industry short about 200,000 drivers, which has dramatically exacerbated what it looked like before COVID. So that's
Yeah,
that's variable number one. Go for it. Yeah.
oh no, I'll throw in a third. You right, you have the spending mix, right,
Yeah.
from travel, leisure, entertainment, live events, restaurants to home, new homes, existing homes, uh, home offices, all these tangible goods, and that's still going strong, right? So that's the number three. Number three on there is demand is up. Load volumes
So
are
demand,
up.
yep. Demand is totally up. And what's really interesting, yeah, you're right. So people that had saved money for a year now have this money to spend, and they want to buy new things. And there's another variable that also interplays into that, in that the volatile demand capacity cycles have made it really hard for suppliers to predict the level of inventory they need. And so there's a huge inventory shortage across the industry where, these major retailers don't have enough inventory on their shelves. And some retailers are so inventory constrained that they're literally skipping the DC and going straight to stores. And we're seeing a little bit of that too. So really, you're combining the driver shortage, this demand increase, and a inventory shortage, and you're painting this picture of a really crazy freight market that's pretty unprecedented, I think. Um, so
I
yeah,
think it is unprecedented too, and I think it's going to go along. You see social distancing rules kind of go away in a lot of regions. I think over the coming months they will. Training schools should get back up to full capacity. I know a few have closed down, so that might ease that constraint. And spending on more on travel, more on intangible goods might lower the demand, and that's kind of what I see going forward. I don't know if it's going to hit 2021, maybe it's 2022, but I think those conditions will all ease. But right now, we talk about the driver shortage and training schools. We also have a lot of new construction. We have a lot of manufacturing. There's a general labor shortage. Across the entire economy, which trucking is always competing against. From your point of view, doing more local deliveries and warehouse to hub, is it challenging to find drivers or find vendors with drivers as opposed to the over the road positions that might be out 3-4 weeks at a time?
yeah. I think in general the local driving markets don't. Local truck driver market is not as constrained. It's these folks get home every night. They get paid by the hour. So I mean, in that, even like driver turnover within local fleets is just way lower than OTR. So it's really OTR that's experiencing the burden of this, and that's where you can see this reflected in wages, right? Old Dominion, I think, is offering 6-figure salaries for truck drivers, and carriers are trying to find ways to get these drivers home on time, more predictably, and ultimately, it's crazy for a carrier right now to hire drivers. But the reality is there's two ways to increase capacity. You can either hire more drivers, or you can increase efficiency. You can get more out of the drivers that you currently have. And what we've learned is there's a huge opportunity for efficiency gains if people are looking for it. And the carriers who work with us have been able to leverage Baton as a strategic way to increase the productivity of their existing fleet.
And it goes back to that 6.5 hours versus 9 hours, right? Of drive time on hours of service. Certainly, we've been talking about the hub system. We've been talking about the warehouse at the real end of the final or first mile. Describe a little bit about the hub system that Baton envisions.
Yeah, so basically our goal is, like I said, every single carrier might operate one terminal in one area. So our goal is to open dozens of terminals in a given area. So, our goal is to really be within 5 to 10 miles of every single destination or origin warehouse that your long haul carriers would normally deliver or pick up from. And so right now in LA, we have three operations. There's one in Fontana, one in Ontario, one in Santa Fe Springs. We're also opening Moreno Valley, San Bernardino, Santa Clarita later this summer. And then we'll do the same thing in other major metros. So we're going to do that in Atlanta later this year, Chicago pretty soon after. And really it's, can we place one of these at every single, off-highway congestion bottleneck so that a long-haul carrier really is just in and out, right? One of the sayings that we say is like they need to be able to drop and hook within 15 minutes and get out of the city. And then we can handle the rest.
And that goes along with supply chain disruptions, really. I mean, you've had these inventory levels that you were talking about earlier. Being able to react faster, right? Be more productive, more efficient, be able to react faster, get the product and the goods to the DC or the warehouse or the store where it needs to be in a very quick amount of time or a short amount of time is a high premium or very valued right now, right?
Yeah, totally. I think, there's you look at inventory. I'm stepping out of my area of like expertise, but intuitively, if you're trying to plan inventory, and you're like a Walmart, there are two types of problems that might exist, right? One is a lead time problem, meaning things take longer than you expect them. But that's easy to adjust for. You just predict earlier what you're going to need, and so you can adjust for lead time problems. The biggest problem in inventory planning is volatile lead times, right? So something shows up at this time, this day, and then next week it shows up 3 days later. And really, if you can create these 24/7 hubs across the entire country, you can really stabilize volatile lead times and add a level of predictability to when inventory is going to arrive for shippers.
So we've been talking about physical assets, trucks, deliveries, bumping the docks, and also the hubs. But you need technology to do all of this, right? And you guys are developing a lot of great technology there at Baton. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So I think the biggest reason why is we fundamentally believe that this is a technology problem. And when you think about it, if you were trying to operate one relay, you were actually and you have a long haul fleet and you're trying to relay off all those long haul loads to local drivers. You've taken the complexity of one long haul load and you've effectively doubled it, right? So you now have to make sure that local driver has all the information that the long haul driver did, gets to the appointment on time, and is able to come back and stage a load at the appropriate time for that return load. Well, our goal is to do that in dozens of locations all over major cities and multiple cities for every long haul carrier. So the information complexity that's needed to manage this efficiently and not lose loads, and in fact increase the service performance of loads over what an OTR would get is remarkably high. So the first technological component of Baton is managing all that information. So we have a proprietary relay-based TMS that we've built. On top of that, we have this optimization engine that really underlies where all of our that's kind of where our secret sauce is, right? So we've built that off of some expertise of one of our lead engineers, former NASA, Apple, Stanford PhD dropout, and he's really built this optimization engine that allows us to make sure that every single delivery, every single pickup happens on time, and we maximize efficiency of our fleet. And then thirdly, it's really about making sure all of the information gets to the right place. So we have integrations into all the ELD devices within all of the local trucks that we operate. And those need to get piped back to our customers within the right time period so they can send those visibility updates to their customers.
That is complex. I mean, it's all about communication. So about integrations and being able to communicate all these different steps in the process back to one central hub.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, we're about halfway through 2021, about to hit the second half into 2022. What are the grand plans for Baton going forward over the next, say, 6 to 18 months? I mean, what do you have your eyes set on right now?
So, Baton's when we first rolled out Baton, our goal is to democratize this last mile relay model for every single carrier in the U.S. And what we've started with is we've gone after the larger and medium sized folks. So we're now live with 4 of the top 10 largest asset based carriers. We also have a handful of medium sized fleets like Chima and Andrus and Bison. And really the goal is once we've built a footprint with these medium large size carriers, we can start democratizing it in other areas for smaller fleets. So now we have over about 60 loads per day in Los Angeles, and that's enough density to now offer this service to someone that might have like a 200 truck fleet instead of 2,000. So that's kind of phase one. It's really about growing density with large and medium-sized fleets in LA, democratizing it for smaller fleets. We'll also open up Atlanta later this year, and then the goal by 2023 is to be in about 5 of these major metros, and then after that, once we've kind of laid out this foundation, we're starting to pilot with AV companies where we can really create this autonomous highway only relay we can create these hubs, these transfer hubs, where an autonomous highway only fleet can hand off a load to one of our local drivers. So we already have a pilot going with one of the larger AV trucking companies, and we'll start offering that across the U.S. as we scale this out with our existing customers.
And that is part of the future, right? Once you get the AV trucks into the hub, then it's manual driving to that warehouse to doing the duties of the driver, and that's where it really all comes together.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the industry, trucking more than I think any other industry, there's a lot of pressure. Like the industry needs autonomous highway vehicles because there's a OTR driver shortage. There's going to be more demand for long haul trucking, in general. I think the industry needs about 1 million more drivers in the next 5 years to deal with the increased demand requirements for like 1 to 2 day delivery. That's a lot of pressure on the industry to adopt more OTR drivers. And I don't think millennials are going to take the job. So unless some major things change. And so that there's a lot of pressure for autonomous highway vehicles to come into play, unlike any other kind of opportunity for AVs or other industry for AVs.
It would be really interesting to see the new crop of drivers in that next generation after that, and if that'll even be a thing of the road driving again. So the jury is certainly out on that. But looking forward to seeing where Baton goes from here, and looking forward to seeing you back in person in Chattanooga, November 8th through the 10th for F3, the Future of Freight Festival. And we'll definitely have to grab a drink downstairs in the FreightWaves bar.
Definitely. Can't wait.
Perfect. Thank you again. And stay tuned for the next Fireside Chat here at FreightWaves Live at Home.